Hello everybody, before the video starts I would like you all to subscribe and like the video. That's it, enjoy. Chapter 36. Chapter size, 1000 words. The old Walder's eyelids trembled at the sight before him, though he quickly composed himself. Age and long years of scheming had made him cautious. With a wavering smile, he raised his voice to break the tension. Selena, your husband has come to claim you. At once, the crowded hall stirred. Voices echoed his declaration, and the gathered phrase, sons, daughters, and lesser kin, smiled awkwardly, turning their gazes toward a girl standing near the center. Yes, Selena, they chorused. Your husband has come for you. Walder Frey had once intended to wed his most beautiful daughter to Robb Stark. But Robb had broken that betrothal, and Edmure Tully had lost Riverrun. In response, Walder, insulted and enraged, chose blood over honor, slaughtering both men in the infamous treachery of the Red Wedding. Originally, Walder had planned a different course, to divide the Riverlands with Theon Greyjoy, biding his time until Roose Bolton might be freed of obligations and join him in driving Theon back across the sea to the Iron Islands. But Theon's strength had exceeded every calculation. From the reports of beaten soldiers out of Seaguard, more than 1,000 men had been stationed there, yet they had surrendered in less than 10 minutes beneath Theon's furious assault. Now, as Theon's 4,000 hardened troops marched closer, Walder, who had already suffered grievous losses during the War of the Five Kings, saw prudence in a change of strategy. He would not oppose such might, he would wed his daughter to it. As for Theon's supposed betrothal to Myrcella Baratheon, Walder hardly cared. In his mind, kings were above such trivialities. A king could take as many wives as he pleased, who would dare challenge him? In truth, Walder would not have blinked if Theon had wed two women at once, so long as the power behind him remained unchallenged. Thus, Walder smiled with a mixture of cunning and desperation. To him, Theon now seemed a worthy match, perhaps even a savior for his dwindling house. I hope you will take my daughter to wife, he said, his voice laced with both plea and calculation. What do you think? My wives are all my lawful wives, Theon declared firmly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Walder blinked in surprise. He had expected arrogance, but Theon's confidence carried the weight of certainty. Without hesitation, Walder ordered a feast prepared and pressed Theon to remain the night in the Twins before departing. Theon did not decline. He agreed at once, and further demanded 2,000 men from Walder's household to accompany him back to his domain. Walder, keen to secure the bond, granted the request without delay. That evening, after the feast ended and the hall emptied, Theon carried Selena in his arms back to his chamber. She was of age, and though nervous, did not resist. Theon, long denied such comforts in his former life, over a decade without intimacy, did not act the gentleman. Yet he restrained himself somewhat, mindful that it was her first night. He took what he wished, but left her dignity intact, though not without a lingering sense of dissatisfaction. By dawn, Theon rose with renewed vigor. With Selena now bound to him as wife, he returned to Seagate, leading the 2,000 soldiers gifted by his new father-in-law. Within the great hall of the Twins, silence hung after his departure. At last Walder, his tone carrying an edge of satisfaction and fragile hope, broke it. We have made the right choice. Others followed his lead, voices rising in reluctant agreement. Still, though joy flickered at their seeming good fortune, unease gnawed beneath. All knew that once Theon began reshaping the Riverlands in his own image, their laughter might sour. Meanwhile, in Seaguard, Theon wasted no time. He commanded his followers to gather every refugee scattered across the war-torn countryside. From Riverrun and the Iron Islands, he demanded provisions. Within 2 weeks, Seaguard alone teemed with tens of thousands of displaced souls. To them, Theon first offered 2 full days of meals, bread, broth, and meat enough to fill their bellies, and then ordered them to bathe, washing away the grime of their long wanderings. When they had finally regained their strength, Theon revealed his true plan. He would not allow them to rot in hunger and despair, instead, he imposed corvée labor. At the mention of work by the river, many refugees groaned in misery, believing the meals had only been a cruel prelude to exhaustion. Yet unlike their past hardships, this labor came with structure. The king decrees, a noble proclaimed, standing tall before them, that all who serve in corvée will receive 2 full meals daily, along with 1 copper coin. You will be divided into production teams. The 10 most efficient will each earn an extra bowl of broth and 2 additional coins. The announcement stunned the ragged crowd. Murmurs spread, and then a few dared to step forward. Master Knight, did I hear correctly? One man cried, his voice cracking with disbelief. Is it true? The noble, a stern son of the Iron Islands, looked down upon the kneeling figures. His first instinct was disdain. He nearly stepped back, but then checked himself, recalling Theon's commands. His lip curled as he spoke. Pitiful refugees, to know His Majesty Theon is to know the blessing of the drowned god himself. With a dismissive wave, he turned and strode away, leaving the murmurs swelling into cautious hope. Gold dragons and stores of food still remained at Theon's disposal. He had plundered the west, taken silver from Petyr Baelish, drawn resources from Tywin's coffers, and gathered supplies through his reach into King's Landing. From there, he stretched trade lines along the Blue Branch as far as the coasts near Seaguard. Every coin, every sack of grain, every refugee's hand, Theon bent them all toward one purpose, the strengthening of his rule. Chapter 37. Chapter size, 1,000 words. As news of the construction of Seaguard spread, a large number of refugees began moving to Seaguard on their own initiative. The reason was simple: either risk believing the rumor was true or wait to starve. Theon accepted all suggestions and eliminated the hidden threat of the twins, leaving the north free of concerns. At the same time, he wrote a letter of assistance to Petyr Baelish and his wife in the Vale. The belief was that Baelish's influence, and the Vale's food, would soon arrive. Indeed, with so many refugees taking part in building Seaguard's docks and other facilities, Theon's own stores would not last long. Reluctantly, he wrote a formal request to Petyr Baelish, borrowing a vast supply of food from the Lord Protector of the Vale. Littlefinger was unexpectedly generous, agreeing to Theon's seemingly unreasonable demand. Theon could not help but sigh, relieved that he had not let Baelish die in King's Landing. Yet he also knew Petyr Baelish would never give up his schemes. For now, however, food was the most important matter, and everything else could be set aside. Even the recovery of the Riverlands was handled hastily by Theon. With the war in King's Landing appearing settled, everyone in Westeros was busy with their own problems. For Theon, the priority was transforming Seaguard into a true port city. From there, using Seaguard as a secondary station, a massive harbor would be built at the mouth of the Blue Fork, linking it with Bay. Under Theon's rule, caravans could then conduct efficient trade with Essos, greatly boosting development. The first shipment of supplies carried down the Blue Fork came as support from the Vale. A large amount of food was unloaded from the cargo ships under the hopeful eyes of the crowd. Theon watched from the docks, already planning his next move to secure the people's safety. Whether it was developing Seaguard into a port or constructing the Blue Fork harbor, the projects would take no more than 3 months. But once that time passed, the ever-growing influx of refugees would need to be resettled. In fact, there were already at least 200,000 refugees scattered not only in Seaguard but across the region. If even half of them perished from hunger, disease, or human cruelty, only about 100,000 would remain alive. Meanwhile, Theon's main forces began reclaiming the 7 cities he had originally designated. These 7 settlements, arranged in a gourd-like shape, would become the future military and political centers of the region. From them, Theon's decrees would first be announced before spreading outward. All 7 had grown from small towns, chosen by Theon for their strategic locations. Should war break out, they could support one another without being delayed, isolated, or besieged. 50 days passed in the blink of an eye. The Riverlands had submitted to Theon on the surface, but no one knew how many lords were secretly preparing to act. Theon did not dare to deal with them immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to the bar of soap before him, its floral fragrance bringing him a rare sense of satisfaction. Glass, soap, and black powder, these were the 3 essential treasures for anyone who had traveled through time. Glass already existed in Westeros, and Theon himself had some knowledge of glassmaking techniques. As for black powder, he followed the recipe, but it failed to explode, producing only a few sparks. Thus, Theon focused on soap, the easiest to produce. Using wood ash and animal fat, with the addition of certain spices, he created a soap of fine quality and pleasing appearance. In truth, Theon had originally planned to distill spirits, but alcohol production consumed too much grain. He even issued a strict decree forbidding the private use of grain for brewing. Whether noble or commoner, anyone caught breaking the law would face no less than 3 years of punishment, with no upper limit. Still, Theon did not ban alcohol entirely. Each of the 7 major cities had official breweries. Anyone wishing to drink or sell liquor could purchase it legally there. For now, Theon intended to market his soap only as a luxury good, targeting the great lords across the realm. The leftovers from production would be slightly refined and sold to lesser nobles and knights. As for the common people, he had no plans to sell to them. Their purchasing power was too low, and besides, they had little access to animal fat. Theon summoned Tom Beale and showed him the soap he had crafted. Upon seeing it, Tom immediately recognized its potential. If sold to the slaveholders of Essos, it could surely be exchanged for a great quantity of gold dragons. However, Theon made his conditions clear. Soap could only be sold in Essos in exchange for essential supplies such as food and cloth, not gold. Only 30% of the soap was to be sold in Westeros for gold dragons. Essos had no long night. Its climate was favorable, and the 9 free cities were immensely wealthy. Theon believed that slaveholders there would gladly spend their dusty hoards of gold on a luxury that doubled as a symbol of status. But how does a luxury good become a mark of status? Theon handed Tom a pamphlet and instructed him. When you go to Essos, do not sell it outright. First, use my name to arrange meetings with the leading slaveholders of the great city-states. Then present the soap as a gift, and be sure to demonstrate its effects in public during your visits. Tom was baffled by Theon's approach to marketing. For the first time, he realized that business could be so subtle, even manipulative. In commerce, what is sold is often not the product itself, but the brand and the symbols of identity and prestige it conveys. And so, Tom set sail for Braavos with the first shipment of 500 bars of soap. Chapter 38. Chapter size, 1600 words. A silver light streaked across the night sky as Theon stood at the window, gazing toward the harbor, now dark and flickering in the rain. He sighed. After this night, the difficulty of construction would surely increase. Many refugee homes had already collapsed under the downpour, but fortunately, the winds remained mild despite the heavy rain. Theon's rule over the Riverlands had lasted nearly 3 months. By now, the Riverlands were largely stabilized, and the construction of Seaguard's harbor was nearly complete. A total of 90,000 refugees were about to be dismissed, and a solution had to be found for their resettlement. Closing his territorial plans, Theon recalled that during his governance he had eliminated many nobles and confiscated vast amounts of land. His plan was to divide these 90,000 refugees into villages between Riverrun and Seaguard Port. The future development of Seaguard would surely demand a great deal of manpower and resources. At the same time, construction of the 7 great cities in the Riverlands had only just begun. For convenience, Theon named them after the 7 colors of the rivers. During this period, Theon generously knighted many of his soldiers, granting lands to those who had distinguished themselves in battle. As his earliest followers, these knights strongly supported his new policies. The grain tax was suddenly reduced to 40%, while many miscellaneous levies were abolished altogether. For a time, Theon won the hearts of countless people. The realm was nearing the end of the long summer, with Westeros's population at its peak, between 25 and 30 million. The Riverlands, as fertile plains, had once supported 3 million people before the war. The War of the 5 Kings, which raged for more than a year, had cost at least 500,000 lives. Only Theon's intervention had brought an early peace, ending the war a year or two sooner and sparing further bloodshed. A torrential rain lasted through the night. By morning, Theon immediately ordered the newly created administrative office to prepare soup for those whose homes had collapsed. Theon's instinct for infrastructure ran deep. He wished to transform the Riverlands overnight into the realm he envisioned. But beginnings are always the hardest. The Riverlands lay in ruins, and Theon had neither gold nor grain. A cook cannot make rice without rice. Thus, Theon now waited for Tom Beale's return. Tom's voyage to Essos and back required 2 or 3 months, and he was expected to return within days. The Riverlands could harvest wheat 3 times a year. Thanks to the long summer, autumn and winter were almost absent, leaving only spring and summer. The next wheat harvest was still 2 months away. If they could endure until then, the food crisis would ease. But the coming 2 months would be the hardest. Because of the war, the last harvest had either been plundered or left to rot in the fields. The Red Keep. Since Sansa had married Tyrion, Joffrey's humiliations had lessened somewhat. Yet whenever he encountered Sansa and Tyrion together, he never failed to find some excuse to humiliate them. Joffrey, ever deserving of the title of greatest tyrant, once shouted angrily at Tywin during a royal council meeting before the Red Wedding. "My father won the real war, while you cower in your castle, too afraid to march." This incident deepened the rift between Joffrey and the Lannisters, while at the same time giving the Tyrells hope. "Do not be afraid, child. What sort of man do you think our king is? Olenna asked, holding Sansa's hand. Sansa hesitated, then whispered with a trembling voice, a monster. Olenna's eyes gleamed with sudden understanding. She saw that Sansa was a simple, honest noblewoman, incapable of lying. Rumors in King's Landing only confirmed it. Yet Olenna trusted her granddaughter. Marjorie was even more beautiful than Olenna had once been and, under her grandmother's guidance, skilled at manipulation and intrigue. If that failed, another path would have to be taken. Originally, Littlefinger had planned to spirit Sansa away, but his scheme was uncovered by Varys. The spider then persuaded the Queen of Thorns, who arranged for Loras to draw near Sansa with the intent of marriage. But once Littlefinger discovered this, he immediately informed Tywin. Tywin was displeased. If the North allied with the Reach, then the West, the Riverlands, the Vale, and the Crownlands between them would be imperiled. Thus, Cersei was forced to marry Loras, while Sansa was wed to Tyrion. Though House Tyrell could raise an army of 120,000, it was still not enough to match Tywin's 60,000 elite troops, especially given the cunning methods of the Lion. Tywin required the lords of the Westerlands to assemble their men for regular training, which made their armies far more disciplined and effective than those of other regions. At the same time, the West was rich in gold mines, ensuring that its weapons were the finest among the Seven Kingdoms. Joffrey's wedding was scheduled for mid-November. 3 months before the event, invitations had already been sent to the castles of the great lords of Westeros. Among them, naturally, was the new player in the game, Theon Greyjoy. Holding the invitation in his hand, Theon turned to the two women playing Syvass and said, "The king is to be wed. Pack your things, to attend the wedding." That same morning, the harbor was alive with crowds beginning their day's labor. In the administrative office, Theon instructed Maester to oversee Seaguard's management and to recruit as many Maesters as possible. Theon himself departed for King's Landing with Myrcella and Selena, escorted by a cavalry of 100 men. With time to spare, the journey took half a month. When he arrived, the capital had not yet shaken off the shadow of war. Refugees filled the streets, still struggling to survive, and none knew what had become of the old High Septon. News of Theon's arrival quickly spread among the nobles of the city. Naturally, the first to learn of it was Varys, Master of Whispers. Hearing his little birds report, Varys sighed. Theon seemed a changed man since the former king had visited House Stark. Men like this, Varys thought, seemed able to foresee the turning of the tide, and profit from it. Such men were always the most dangerous, like the former Master of Coin, Littlefinger, who thrived in chaos. Theon's first act in the capital was to take Myrcella to see her mother, Cersei Lannister. Though his followers often addressed him as Your Majesty, outwardly Theon still bore the title of Lord of the Riverlands and the Iron Islands. Myrcella was overjoyed at the prospect of seeing her mother again. Before they could knock, Cersei herself opened the door. She too was delighted to see her daughter. Then her eyes fixed on Theon. "You should be visiting your king. Do you think you may simply walk into my chambers?" Theon glanced around her room with a mocking smile, then turned and left without a word. On his way to the throne room, Theon happened to see a man with a severed hand. With a sudden realization, he stepped forward. Jaime. Jaime Lannister turned and saw Theon smiling at him. "You are Theon Greyjoy, the shapeshifting squid?" Jaime asked curiously. Quote? Quote. Confusion spread across Theon's face. "The shapeshifting squid. Gods, who gave me that name?" Seeing his bewilderment, Jaime explained. "That is what the Crown's lords call you. They say you carried off all the food from King's Landing, and that is why the city nearly fell." Theon gave him a blank look. "Perhaps I should have let Stannis march in. He might have offered me high office instead of branding me a thief." Jaime laughed and shook his head. "My brother spoke of you. He said you were skilled with a blade. If I still had my right hand, I would gladly test myself against you." He lifted his golden stump with a wry smile. "The strength of a warrior lies in his spirit, not in his hand," Theon said, patting Jaime on the shoulder before moving on. Jaime stood stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter, raising his golden hand as though in salute. When Theon reached the throne room, Joffrey sat upon the Iron Throne, listless and bored. "Your Grace, how fare you today?" Theon asked. Joffrey lifted his eyelids to see who dared speak so casually. But when his eyes fell on Theon Greyjoy, his surprise was plain. "Lord Theon, you have come for my wedding." "Of course. How could I miss your Grace's wedding?" Theon replied with a smile. He drew a square box from his cloak. "Your Grace, a gift for you." Joffrey reached for the box, but Theon pulled it back. A wedding gift, your grace, is to be opened on the wedding day. Everyone in the hall wiped cold sweat from their brows. No one dared speak to Joffrey in such a manner. His cruelty was infamous. Yet Joffrey was not angered. Instead, he leaned forward and asked, "Have you any tales of interest? Tell me one." Theon gestured with his hand, and the two withdrew to Joffrey's chambers. In the days that followed, Theon often boasted to Joffrey and told him strange tales from Middle-earth. Meanwhile, the world's magical tide was rising at a staggering pace, its intensity growing beyond reason. The most obvious sign came from his armor. It absorbed golden ions from the air to strengthen its defenses, allowing Theon to feel the magic in the atmosphere swelling constantly. No doubt, the sorcerers in the Shadowlands were rejoicing in madness. Author's note. If you're enjoying the story and wish to support me, you can visit my p@tr30n, where you can read 50+ extra chapters ahead. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world. Blue heart smile. p@tr30n comp DylanBriak. To be continued. Thanks for watching.